Many people these days are studying genealogy and history, and one gentleman in our area is doing just that. Dr. Frank Polidoro joins us today, and he is the Secretary-Treasurer for the Butler Township Supervisors. Dr. Polidoro, you told me that you were going to speak at an event. Someone asked you to speak and give a history of the township, and when you checked it out, there wasn't a whole lot, so now you're taking it upon yourself to try to find more so that there will be a big history of Butler Township. So tell us about that.
Right. Well, I discussed it with the other two supervisors, and we saw, basically they said work on it, and we found out what we had at the township. And we had two good sources. We had one from 1880, anonymous, about the history of the township, and we had another one from the Lions Club from 1984. So I used both of those, and they were a good background. A timeline was created of a history. So this is a timeline of a history, as in most histories are, any history can be biased one way or another, or it can leave things out. So it's a starting point.
Absolutely. So now you're trying to put all the pieces together. So you're hoping by doing this interview today, people watching will actually maybe have some information, some old photos and that. If they do have anything that would help you compile this history, where do they get in touch with you, or where do they send it?
All right. Well, they can get in touch with me personally, or they better to make sure it gets put where it belongs and stored properly, or at least copied. Jane Reeks, one of the ladies that, one of our administrative people who does an excellent job, is the one that's in charge of this. So what we're looking for is for example, if you look at the timeline, if you don't have the timeline, I'm pretty sure we can get it for you. Have it on our website. You can see what we have in the timeline. You can say, okay, is there something missing? Put this in. For example, one lady wrote me a letter, and to make a long story short, she brought in the fact that her grandfather had gotten married just before the Latimer Massacre, which was September 10th, 1897, and came home from his honeymoon because of that. So the Latimer Massacre needs to be put into the timeline. So even though it's not in Butler Township, it's right near there. But yeah, that kind of stuff. And also, if you have any old maps, old pictures, we're not going to keep them, but we'd like to, if we're allowed to copy them. And that sort of thing. Our goal is to put all this stuff on the website so that people can look through it. And actually, it's almost a thing where, and the other thing is, if you want to write something, write out a story of your family, we can include that too. And if you see something that's on there that you say, well, it didn't happen this way, and it's almost like a Wikipedia thing where people can contribute to it.
Have you gotten quite a few people contacting you thus far?
Well, we've had, let's see, there's one gentleman who has a whole bunch of stuff, but I get the impression he moved into his parents' house, so he has to go through it all. So I'm going to meet with him. And like I said, I talked to one lady, the lady that told me about her grandparents, and they lived actually in what's now Foothills Drive, that was known as East Butler at the time in the late 1800s. So she gave me the insight into the Latimer Massacre. Also, she mentioned something I thought was interesting. Her grandparents, when they went to church, in the summer they went down to the churches in St. John's by buckboard. But in the winter they went to the Methodist chapel because the hill was too deadly to go down. I assume it's the Mill Road. It's a Mill Hill Road, yeah. Mm-hmm. And what else? One other thing I'd like to get in there, I'm interested in history. I'm interested in American history, and especially the French and Indian War and that sort of thing. Why was this known as the wilderness? And I'll give you the one reason real quick. The Susquehannock, and I'll say Indians because they're the Susquehannocks, let's call them the Susquehannocks, were wiped out in the Beaver Wars in the 1600s, late 1600s by the Iroquois. And the Iroquois, so this area was, let's say, devoid of population. And the Iroquois they were very good diplomats and that sort of thing. And what they did, they wanted to bring in other Indian tribes to be a buffer against the white colonists coming up. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons for the Battle of Wyoming. And the Battle of Wyoming is important to the people in Butler Township because Zebulon Butler was in the second massacre of Wyoming was there present, and he's why he's the namesake is very interesting. I think it was because in the Revolutionary War, in the War of 1812, the British used their Indian allies to attack, and the Americans were really upset about that. So it was almost like remember the Maine type of a thing. It was a rallying cry. I think that's the reason Zebulon Butler was chosen as the namesake for Butler Township, but I'm not sure of that. So if someone has information on that, please.
Today's news feature is brought to you by Feisner's Ford in Freeland, who is celebrating 75 years in business. Give them a call at 570-636-3920, or you can log on to feisnersford.com.